Welcome to the Let's Talk Spiritual Series podcast, and we're back with another episode with Supriya Chechi, and we're continuing the ninth chapter. It's been a couple of episodes now. We haven't finished the ninth chapter, but we're getting into a lot of details with this chapter basically.
That's right.
So
Thank
it's
you.
very interesting chapter, and yeah, over to you, Supriya Chechi.
Yeah,
We'll
thank
continue
you,
with it.
Kannan. We're happy to be back attempting to teach
Hare
the ninth
Krishna.
chapter.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada. And it's here, we were just discussing before we started the recording how the material world is a very tricky and unreliable place. And even if we take shelter of movement, the material world and material energy keeps doing its job of trying to kick us and fry us and whatnot. So all we can do is that we have the right support system and association and the right understanding and knowledge to deal with it when it comes. Just yesterday, I was listening to a lecture where they were telling of how, in a conversation between Yudhishthir Maharaj and a Yaksha in the Mahabharata, I think you're more familiar with the Mahabharata than I am. You've
Mm.
been reading it recently, but you may be able to tell where it comes. Basically, the point that was being made is I think Yudhishthir Maharaj explains to the Yaksha that the material world is like a frying pan, and we are all literally getting tossed and fried in it. And
Mm.
the sun is the fire under the frying pan. The months and days and weeks are the spoons and ladles to stir it, and time is basically eating us up when we come fried. Now who is doing the actual frying, that is left unsaid. I think it's understood it is Maya or the material energy,
Mm.
but we are all just tossed around like this and time just
Mm.
consumes,
Isn't that
the
part where he's in that all his other brothers are like they're all dead and he's trying to revive them on that there's the he has to answer a few questions and all that by the person
that's
that
right, I think that's the one.
I think okay
I
because
think
there's
that's
two instances there's one during that and the other one is like I think somewhere later on when he has to when there is like a snake that is almost about to kill him or something like binds him and all that stuff. The snake was a celestial being in the previous life, and then in this life,
right, right.
they first, yeah. So it was. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay, yeah. That's right. And there's another interesting conversation that Yudhishthir has with Narada Muni, isn't it? And I think that where he asks Narada Muni, what is the most amazing thing in this material world? And Narada Muni says, it is that although every day hundreds and thousands of people are dying, if out of old age, if nothing else, and we are aware of that, still we are so shocked
Okay.
and so bewildered when we hear that someone has died. That's a separate conversation that Yudhishthir has. I'm not sure exactly where, but that is Narada Muni giving him advice.
Hmm.
So here we are getting, like you said, the ninth chapter. It's a very rich chapter, and Krishna having spoken about the greatness of this knowledge and his own greatness, he is now suddenly striking, you can say, like a negative note in music, like a jarring note, but it's essential before he is going to reveal the real confidential stuff. He's striking this note. These two verses, the 11th and the 12th, are talking of people who do not understand his greatness. However much they are given an opportunity to appreciate him, or even if they're given knowledge and first-hand experience, they condemn him when he comes in the human form in his pastimes, like when he comes in Mathura and Vrindavan and so on. They don't appreciate that he is God. So this is verse 11. If you like to read the translation.
Yeah. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be.
Okay, so this is basically the problem that these people have, is that when he descends in the human form, they mistake him to be an actual human being. And they just say, how is this person God? He looks like you and me. He even died in Prabhasha Kshetra when a hunter accidentally hit him in the foot, mistaking it to be the head of a deer. They do not know my transcendental nature as the supreme Lord of all that be. And so then the question arises, why did he come in this human form? Why did he not come and do this entire pastime as Krishna of Vrindavan and Mathura and Gokul, etc.? Why didn't he just do it as four-armed Vishnu, always carrying a conch, and that might have impressed people and kept them at bay and prevented them from making this terrible mistake of presuming that he's just an ordinary human being. That we'll come to later, of why he doesn't do that. Here, the purport, if you like to read the first para.
Yeah. So, from the other explanations of the previous verses in this chapter, it is clear that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although appearing like a human being, is not a common man. The personality of Godhead, who conducts the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the complete cosmic manifestation, cannot be a human being. Yet there are many foolish men who consider Krishna to be merely a powerful man and nothing more. Actually, he is the original Supreme Personality, as is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Paramaha Krishna in the Supreme Lord.
Yeah, because Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. This is an often quoted description of Krishna from the prayers of Brahma. And this Brahma Samhita is the very prayer book, that a portion of which that still survived, and that Lord Chaitanya found when he came on his South Indian tour. He found it in Tiruvattar. That's right. So this is Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. These Brahma Samhita prayers are always chanted in ISKCON temples when an Abhishekam is going on. Like if it was Balaram Purnima and they keep a little deity, a brass deity of Panchaloha or whatever, when the Abhishek is going on, the Brahma Samhita prayers are chanted by the pujaris who are doing it and by the whole congregation, because a lot of us know it by heart. And it's just 2 lines of the Brahma Samhita that is blared across the microphone, a recording every morning at 7:15 when the deities give darshan in their new clothes. That is the famous Yamuna Devi voice over. This is, Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. That very, very nice, catchy kind of slow tune. That's also from the Brahma Samhita. So here, why?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. There was one thing that, relation to this, no, there is one thing. Every time I actually look at this verse, or if there's any other verse that's similar to this, no, I always get connected to there's this verse in, like, I've written it down actually, and it's from Canto 10 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 33rd chapter, text
Uh-huh.
29, and in that Parikshit Maharaj, he asks Sukadeva Goswami, like, oh, this is regarding, I think the situation was that he wanted to know, like, Krishna is famous for being with the gopis. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's like there's this doubt, like, how can God be with in a romantic sort of situation and all that stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And so in one sense, he's like portraying, like, he's projecting his idea of what society is onto Krishna. And
Uh-huh.
so he asked the question, O Brahmana, the supreme personality of Godhead, the Lord of the universe, has descended to this earth along with his plenary portion to destroy irreligion and re-establish religious principles. Indeed, he is the original speaker, follower, and guardian of moral laws. How then could he have violated them by touching other men's wives?
Right.
So, so he asked this to Sukadeva Goswami. So
Yeah,
Sukadeva Goswami reply to this was something was interesting. So I wanted to keep a note of that. And so
yeah.
he says the status of powerful controllers is not harmed by any apparently audacious transgression of morality we may see in them, for they are just like fire which devours everything fed into it and remains unpolluted.
Hmm.
So that
Okay.
was,
Yeah,
yeah, that
because
was,
correct. Yeah, thank you. But because this is like the analogy that's given of the sun in the Ishopanishad, that the Supreme Lord is like the sun. Its rays can touch, go into, once it's really up high up in the sky, it can go into dirty alleyways where someone has urinated
hmm,
and dry up that stinky urine. It reaches everywhere, the slanting sun rays. But that doesn't mean that the sun gets affected by the stink of the urine. It just purifies it and dries up that land, and after a while, in fact, sometimes the stink of whatever it is that is gets have more severe because of the rays of the sun or the heat interacts, and then it just gets dried up and disappears. So, but that doesn't mean that the Supreme Lord is in any way contaminated. Therefore, similarly, yeah, it's important, and Parikshit Maharaj is actually asking this question for the benefit of the future readers of the
hmm,
Kali Yuga, because the Bhagavatam is the sun that appears once Lord Krishna has departed. The idea is that Lord
it's,
Krishna has departed and the world is been thrown into darkness
uh,
and gloom, but
so
instead the Bhagavatam starts to rise to guide those who.
it's very interesting because the Bhagavatam starts with all these sages who are from different paths. They're some of them are in bhakti, some are in devotional, some are in like believe in the non-dualistic path, and they're all from different paths. But they
That's
all
right.
want to meet together. They all find that they don't know the answers to everything. So then they know that Sukadeva Goswami is not Sukadeva, sorry, Sutta Goswami is the only person in that era who
Yeah,
who has knowledge because it's passed down from Sukadeva Goswami, who's passed it down from Vyasadeva and Sutta Goswami. So they go to him and then they go to this forest of Naimisharanya and then they sit there
that's
and then
right.
they discuss and so
Correct.
it's interesting because and they say that the world is going to get into a Kali age, the age of darkness. So we are coming to you to for you to tell us what the real truth is, and then he explains the entire Bhagavatam.
Exactly, yeah.
Uh,
Actually, you can go to people who travel to those parts can go to this correct this spot called Naimisharanya. I think it
it's
is in
there.
Uttar. Yeah, yeah, it's very much
Uh,
there in Uttar Pradesh. I'll try and find an article in a BTG, a Back to God magazine, which you can read online and send you the link because that has some pictures and of that was done by somebody who went and then just wrote an article. But regularly, the Trivandrum devotees went about a couple of months back on the tour of those parts. They
uh,
have sanctified it and they have the trees and it's a very peaceful place, and the whole point is that all these sages coming together for a very civilized discussion. It's like so egalitarian and democratic in a modern sense. They get to air their doubts, they're leaving it for posterity. And not just that, an important point that distinguishes ISKCON from the normal Bhagavatam teachers or preachers is that you've heard of the Bhagavad Saptah, which is very popular in India, especially in South India, which just means that Bhagavatam is taught for one full week. It is covered within 1 week. Okay. So this is often sponsored by somebody as a seva or a service to the Lord, and the temples will ask for this much money, and then you select or they select a reputed a professional Bhagavatam preacher who explains in the local language. There's no time for questions, maybe. And on the last day, there's a lot of worship of the Bhagavatam book and a Sri Krishna deity and prasadam and feast and so on. So that's generally there is a tendency to rush through the philosophy and elaborate on those episodes that basically will appeal to the public, which is definitely the rasa
right.
dance, then Rukmani Swayamvar and all they bring in from
Oh,
Krishna's life,
so
and
basically they discuss the 10th canto only. They don't discuss
it,
the
it,
previous
it,
cantos.
it ends up like that. Because
Oh,
that is a public demand, and actually it's wrong to do that because often the public is
uh,
not at all ready.
you'll miss
They
out
just
on you'll miss out on the like you when you if you need to go through that period of creation where they talk about how Brahma creates the entire. I mean, from the navel Brahma's created and then he manifests. He wants to create the whole everything and he can't because he doesn't know exactly where how to do it and then
right.
he meditates on for like almost like thousands of years. He meditates on Vishnu, and then he sees him, and then I mean that whole period of creation is explained, and then the story of Dhruva Maharaj, the story of Jada Bharat, the story of
That's right.
Prahlad Maharaj,
Exactly.
then the story of
Exactly. You said it.
Mahabali.
Those are,
Yeah.
yeah, you've said it. All those avatars. There's so much to learn from the story of Jada Bharat, from Dhruva Maharaj's determination as a small child. There's so much learned from all this. But generally, this is all skimmed over. And even things that are very relevant for the Kali Yuga come up in the 12th canto. That's all. That's all actually. That's precisely what an audience like this needs to hear. But instead, there is a tendency to cater to their romantic taste. So it is this Rukmani Swayamvara is, even if they don't go on all the other days, they will find out when Rukmani Swayamvara, Krishna really comes and takes Rukmini away. He responds to her letter of appeal, and from her tyrannical brother who is trying to marry her off to another evil character. So that's what, but it's a real shame and a loss. And it's not only all those other pastimes that they ought to be hearing, as you correctly pointed out. What about just at the end of the first canto, where we are told clearly that in the age of Kali Yuga, Kali, one of the areas that the Kali really is allowed to take shelter of is gold. And if a lot of these saptahas are flooded with women, with housewives, because it's during the daytime, and or rather it starts around 10:30, and working people can't go for it. So if it is women, they can somehow quickly do their house stuff and come for it. But it's very relevant for them to know that so much of infighting inside families, and jealousy and envy and greed and competition starts with the issue of gold and gold ornaments, across neighbors, within female
Mm.
relatives. She got
Uh,
this even better one, her husband bought it, I didn't get it, and then all big fights start. So this kind of practical stuff that they're supposed to hear often is not emphasized in these Bhagavad Saptahs. But the point I'm coming to is, this is just once for 1 week. Saptaha means week, and they may do it once or twice in the same temple in a year, only once a year, because it costs money to pay the
mm.
professional Bhagavad Saptah and the arrangements. And then every afternoon, normally there has to be some free food for everyone, the prasadam for everyone, lunch, because otherwise they won't stay on for the afternoon, and so on. So, but in ISKCON, every single day, every temple or center, whether qualified or unqualified devotees or inmates or whoever, are meant to sit on a seat which is like the Vyasasan, and they cover some part of the Bhagavatam. So for us, it's not just a 1 week, once in a year, once in a blue moon affair. Every single day, and you can take your pick. You don't like what the speaker or the whatever, whichever section is being covered in a particular temple, especially now online. It's online. Okay, or you prefer something else, go and check out which section of the Bhagavatam is being covered. Because once they start, they go chronologically.
Mm.
So it takes some time before they finish the 10th,
Yeah.
11th cantos and come back to the first canto. You see, and those,
Actually,
yeah,
yeah, because I don't know, because when I was listening to the Business Series podcast, a lot of them, they are also like basically going through the Bhagavatam, but they're going very slow process. And
right.
they also many times they said that, if you if once you've read it, then after you've read it, the only thing that you need to focus on is the 10th canto. But they say that, because they're going through the Bhagavatam, it's like it's important, even though the 10th canto is basically the summary of everything that the Bhagavatam is trying to say.
Yeah,
The other cantos are very important because it gives you like at least a view of like the depth of Krishna. Like, he's not just a cowherd boy and all that, but he's also present at the time of Dhruva Maharaj. Previously, before his being born, he came as Vishnu, and he helps Prahlad, and he comes in all these different circumstances. And also, just when they talk about creation in the first three cantos, we talk about creation. Just the enormity of Krishna himself is explained in such detail that you realize, like, by the time you get to 10th canto, you're dealing with something that is this great.
exactly,
But if
exactly.
you
It's
just start reading, then it might come across as like a story or something, like, like, okay.
That's one thing. And the other thing is that this imperfect approach of covering the Bhagavatam, highlighting just according to the public taste, it can spawn, or it can give rise to a lot of offensive thinking and behavior. Yeah, that is actually what is the root of what there is there's a whole group basically in and around Vrindavan, called Sahajya. Sahaj in Hindi apparently means very easy and cheap and not at all costly. So Saral is another word for it. Sahajya. Sahajyas, for them, Krishna is easily attained.
Mm.
So the Sahajya mentality, they are not here in Kerala, but that mentality can easily be spawned because the listeners don't have the qualification to understand, because they have not gone chronologically, and they start imagining that Krishna is directly reciprocating with them. And I've come across people who attended these come back and tell me that, suddenly there was a rare smell and Krishna was walking through. It's all kind of like absurd, but you can't say
Mm.
anything to their face. It's they just think it was all just so easy that then the afternoon they came back to take rest, and there was some pots and pans making some sound in the kitchen, and they show that Krishna came and he was playing in their kitchen, all because they attended a Bhagavad Saptah in the morning. This is the most dangerous aspect of the Bhagavad Saptah, because it gives people the right to start imagining and taking for granted and cheapening, as you said, the greatness of the personality of God, whom they've been hearing about. It's and this also, because of these offenses, it blocks off their chance of actually forming a simple loving relationship with him. Because if you think about some of the incidents in the Mahabharata, which actually what these people need to hear is something like the Mahabharata. It's Bhagavad Gita has just become a great fashion nowadays.
Mm.
But say in the Mahabharata, this the Khandava forest fire. If you
Mm.
actually just see how nicely Krishna reciprocates. Agni was hungry and hungry, and he needed to eat the whole forest to fill his hunger. And
Mm.
each time he tried to eat the Khandava forest. Khandava, basically, it was under Indra, and it is the area where Delhi has grown up now. I mean, the city of Delhi has
Oh.
come up. So that is
Mm.
why Delhi, the old name for Delhi is Indraprastha, because that whole area where the Khandava forest was under Indradev, the demigod. So each time Agni would start a fire and start trying to devour all the creatures and the whole forest, Indra would pour down rain, because he controlled rain and rainfall, and put out the fire. So Agni finally kind of got very frustrated, and he was getting desperate. So he takes the rupam of a form of a Brahman, and he goes to Krishna, and Arjuna is with Krishna at that time, that they have to somehow help him, because this is becoming too desperate a situation. So then what they do is, Arjuna, being the supreme archer, he keeps shooting arrows in such a way that they non-stop, that they form an umbrella over the Khandava forest and prevent Indra's rains from coming down. And Arjuna protects Agni, Lord Krishna protects Agni in some other way. I'm not sure how. I don't know that detail. But I'm trying to say that even a
Mm.
personality like Agni, he had a genuine need. And this personality of Agni goes to Krishna and Arjuna, and they make such a nice, so in this way, Indra is defeated, and the forest is consumed completely by the Khandava forest fire. Some 5 or 7 creatures are left alive. And there's some reason behind it. Why those, all the others, the animals, the everything is killed. And also, I think the forest had become full of demonic creatures who were hiding there, and that kind of cleansing was also over time was due. So if Krishna can respond to such a basic need that Agni had, that he needs to eat, he's starving, and Indra is getting in the way because this is his area and this is his territory, and each time Indra is stopping it, so Krishna is very willing to go to this extent and use Arjuna, his cousin and his Sakha friend and devotee, as an archer too. So many nice,
Mm.
interesting stories are there in the Mahabharata that actually give people an idea that, oh, I can also appeal to Krishna. I can slowly form some relationship. So it would have been much better if they would just narrate the Mahabharata, for the general public, and then get them ready for the Bhagavatam after some guidance. Like what you've done is absolutely correct. I think you're familiar with the Ramayana and the Mahabharata even before you came to the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. That is the correct route to take. So it protects you from
Mm.
taking things for granted, or at least you've been reading them simultaneously, because you seem
Yeah.
very aware of, yeah, you've
So
definitely been
I think
reading.
I think most people, I think when they grow up, like at least in like mostly when they grow up, like in school and college, at least maybe in my generation, but I think in every generation, they're like they know about the Ramayana, they know about the Mahabharata. They know about the Ramayana more because Ramayana is like very small, like it's very condensed version of like events. It's very like what do you say? It's easier to like. I would say it's easier to understand the Ramayana more, but the
Uh-huh.
Mahabharata is very complicated to understand. In if you
I see.
if yeah, because the Ramayana the premise is very simple that there's a prince and the wife gets kidnapped and then he has to return back. So there's
Right.
a journey on that.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of complications, but Mahabharata it deals with so many other like it's not there's like it deals with so many things because they're all like they're all main characters. All of them are like main characters in one. Like Yudhishthira is like a main character in the story, and
Right.
in the Ramayana it's Ram who's like the main character basically. But in the
I see.
Mahabharata it's like you've got Yudhishthira who's the main character. You've got sometimes Bhima who's the main character, or Bhishma,
Right.
or Krishna sometimes like they're always the main character keeps changing all the time. So you're like always wondering what is like like how the story is gonna go, and who's
Okay.
ultimately going to be. So even when they're listening to Gita, like you'll think that okay, Arjuna is the main character. At the end of the Mahabharata, you think, no, Arjuna, because Krishna considers him the most dear, like the dearmost of all the Pandavas.
And
They consider him the dearmost friend. So, and he's telling the Gita to Arjuna. But at the same time, there's also like, if he's telling that to Arjuna, there's also Sanjay who's listening to that at the same time. There's also Dhananjaya who's also like who's there also listening to it. And then
the
Dhananjaya says,
yeah,
yeah,
the blind king
but the
Dhritarashtra is
blind.
in a
Sorry,
narration.
not Dhananjaya, sorry, Dhritarashtra. Right.
Dhritarashtra, the father
So,
of
so
Duryodhana. Yeah, correct.
yeah, Dhritarashtra, he's listening to that, and he has his own interpretation of the Gita. He doesn't understand it the same way that Arjuna understands. So you're like thinking that okay, like Arjuna is listening to it, but then there's also like because Krishna is telling him this confidential knowledge, but other people are also listening to it. So at the same time, and at the end, Arjuna, Yudhishthira becomes king at the end, and Arjuna is so it's like
I think too many sub stories and
hmm,
plots and subplots are happening in the Mahabharata.
yeah,
Perhaps
I think
that's
for
what you mean.
yeah, because I think for most people, like when they listen to a story, they want to have one main character, and then like
A
but then the
clear plot.
Mahabharata, correct, but the Mahabharata is like the best thing about it is because it's not doesn't have a main character. It has like what do you call? There's a word for that in English. I can't remember. Is it called
A
no?
protagonist is the main
Like
hero.
when
No.
no, like when there's a show when there's no one main character, but there's all of them are main characters. There's a word for that. Um, it starts with E something.
You mean like a multi-star? No.
No, no, it's like some when you're having a in a story
Ens-
when there is
ensemble. EN
ensemble,
ensemble,
yeah,
whatever.
ensemble. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So ensemble, there's ensemble of characters. So they are all like main characters in that, which is interesting because you don't because sometimes you're like thinking, oh, I am like Dhritarashtra sometimes, I am like Arjuna sometimes, I am like Bhima sometimes, I'm like this person. So in a way, it's good because there's always this in Ramayana. The problem happens that so much of emphasis is on Rama that he's so supposed to be so perfect, like so
Uh-huh.
like he's the best archer, the best
Mm,
king, the best. He's so smart. He's
everything.
like
The
he's
son,
ev-
the
the
most
best
beautiful
son.
son, yeah,
Yeah,
to his
he's supposed to be
parents.
so perfect that
That is
at the end of
unreliable.
this at the end of the story there's a fisher he like that fisher the waterman he tells that that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not like Ram because I will never accept a wife if they've gone to
Right,
they've lived
right,
in
right.
somebody else's house, and so
Correct.
Rama has to like almost like just to satisfy the desires of the people living in his kingdom, he puts Sita through that whole process of
Mm,
that
mm.
stepping on the fire, and
Ordeal,
Sita is also
yeah,
like
the ordeal.
ordeal, and so that whole part is it's like it's a very difficult thing to explain to somebody who's
Absolutely.
the it's very difficult to explain that part to somebody who is not so close, who's not like who doesn't want
I
to take the time to
understand.
understand the nuance of the message. Like you can say that okay, he did that because he's supposed to be incarnation of perfection and he's supposed to be a king and he's
Set an
supposed to
example and
set
so
an
on.
example and
Yeah.
supposed to look like supposed to accept like fulfill the desires of all the people living in his kingdom, and and that he knew that Sita is not pure, but just to show everybody that she is pure, he did that. But when you're explaining that to people, they'll be like, no, but he still made her do like he still made her jump into the
But
fire
that
and
right, but that way there are other episodes in the scriptures that are very hard for people to relate to. They seem very unfair, like this the Parshuram avatar, his father ordering
uh,
that Parshuram
his wife
kill his
kill his
mother,
mother. Yeah,
kill his mother
yeah, that's
Renuka,
also
because Renuka kind of so at least mentally thought of a immoral situation with some Gandharva, and then Parashuram before that kill all his brothers because the brothers didn't agree to kill their mother. All these kind of things are very, it's like too extreme, it seems. Of course, one can argue that that's because basically infidelity of any kind was severely punished, and often always is a woman who got it. That is because any relations between a man and a woman, is expected to produce progeny. It was only for that purpose. So if the in this case the male is it is an illicit affair, then it affects the quality of the purity of the blood and the bloodline and so on, because what kind of offspring is going to come out of a illicit affair? So that's the reason one could argue and one could explain that that's the reason Jamadagni reacts so strongly. But still it seems very extreme, never even asking her. Nothing happened. It's just that mentally maybe she was a little weak and she got attracted by the Gandharva who was making some advance towards her. So it is, and on the one hand, even before that, actually, I think Jamadagni's own character, it is contradictory, because a little before that, Jamadagni asks or says to Parashuram, what is the name of that another kind of lover or some person who is connected with the mother Renuka, Kirti Viryan, there's a name like that.
Kirtivirin, I think, yeah, that's what it,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there, promptly Parashuram goes and kills Kirti and brings the body. And then Jamadagni says, oh, why did you do that? We should learn to forgive. We are Brahmanas, we should learn to be forgiving. So it's all contradictory. The next minute, when this issue with another Gandharva comes up, he's telling the son, kill your mother and then kill all your brothers because they didn't obey me. So it's extreme. There are things like that one can't explain at all. That, why was the woman not given any opportunity to even explain what happened? Why no discussion? This is not the regular mood of the Bhagavatam. The sages are sitting together and discussing, and women are, even certain exceptional women were given the right to select their own husbands, Devahuti and Kardamamuni and so on. So it's similarly Ahalya. Ahalya's father, I think, curses her and turns her into, is it a father or her husband? I'm not sure, who turns her into stone, because Indra is trying to have an affair with her, and Indra is cursed for this immorality, and he has to walk around with his body covered with the male organs, some 100 male organs coming out of his body, all meaning really repulsive. So, but this is part of the curse, and it will come up in the Ramayana, because eventually Lord Ram touches the stone statue of Ahilya and she comes back to life. So that also sounds like very hard and not relatable to the modern viewer, because in this case, Ahalya didn't, it was not her fault. She's caught between a lusty demigod like Indra and an angry person, which is, I think, her husband who cursed her, husband or father, I'm not sure. For her. So it's hard. That way, there are many sections of the scriptures that are going to be very difficult to explain to modern readers. You see, what can one do?
Actually, with the exception of, but one thing is good about in the Bhagavad Gita, like when you read the whole Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't. There are sections where, okay, there are sections in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam where they they have made some kind of, there are some discriminatory remarks. Like if you think about it, like in today's context, it's very discriminatory. But I, like when I was listening to the Business Ages podcast, they had like this very interesting way of explaining this, like how to make sense of this in the modern context. It's that you have to, like, in when they're saying that, somewhere in the Bhagavatam, that women are like, they're less intelligent or something, when they say something like that, when they come up with things like that, you you'll have to understand that that is said at a particular time when when knowledge was only concentrated amongst a small group of people known as the Brahmin, and majority of the people, and they are the ones writing the scripture, they are the ones writing the literature, they are the ones writing this message. Majority of the society was not at all educated. It was only that, and this information was only shared amongst the Brahmins. So there are so many other sections like the Shudras or people who are in that who have not who also not educated at the same time. So it was like a, yeah, I don't know. It was like a, yeah, it was knowledge almost like withheld, was kept away from like people almost by the Brahm, like Brahmin. So that,
Actually, what is meant here, yeah, what you're saying is one explanation, but there's another explanation, which is that here, when they're talking about intelligent and less intelligent, they're meaning spiritually less intelligent, because the lady, a woman, one of the qualifications for spiritual intelligence or spiritual thinking and analysis is that you have to be able to show some detachment from that which you're analyzing or that which you're trying to understand or deal with. As it is, even men have a tough time now. This is, we are getting into the Kali Yuga. Even men often are not able to show that
That's
spiritual
why
intelligence.
that's why I
Isn't it?
said that. That's why I said that. Like in the Gita, like if you think about it, like Draupadi understood the message of the Gita like before Arjuna understood, because she in that instant itself she understood she has to surrender to Krishna, and Krishna comes to protect her. But like in the case of Arjuna, he has to go through this entire process, and then that entire process is explained to him by
Sure.
Krishna himself. So so so
And
it's like you can understand that in that
also,
itself.
also the wives of the Brahmanas were doing rituals,
Yeah,
and when Krishna and Balaram sent an appeal, they're very hungry. The wives understood and quickly packed something and gave them. But the Brahmanas who were doing the rituals were meant to please Lord Krishna were so into it and so focused and particular that they said no, we can't be disturbed, because those yagyas are like that. You can't allow any disruption at all. So they were right from their perspective, but the ladies got it much faster and said this is the Supreme Personality and his brother, they've come asking for this help, of course we will set aside all our duties and housework and go and give it to them.
of
That's
course.
so spiritual intelligence is different, and
Hmm.
Prabhupada in different places describes that when women become devotees, this is no longer a hampering or hindering factor for them. And later in the same 9th chapter, Krishna will say, even the low class, the low caste, the women, they
Exactly.
also can achieve me. So then, what to speak of people of higher intelligence like the Brahmins? Here, intelligence is completely the idea to tell the difference between spirit and matter. Now, in that sense, why is it difficult for women to show that, be able to tell the difference and basically be able to show the detachment that's required? Because it is from their body that a child is born, and when it comes to taking action with that child, being harsh where it's required, cutting off a child who is really going to just ruin everything, it's very hard for them, because this child was nurtured in their womb for so many months and is from their blood. Only they know. Only mothers know what it's like, and therefore that sense of sacrifice and attachment, very strong attachment. But in Kali Yuga, crazy things are happening. Like either say the women will kill their own children and give their own daughters for prostitution to a lover, and all kinds of horrible things are happening. So you can ask, where is this great attachment that's hindering their spiritual intelligence? But what's actually meant by intelligence here is very much the spiritual, the ability to be able
Spiritual
to tell the
intelligence.
difference between matter and spirit, and to be able to show detachment in dealing with situations, certain emotional, which the ladies, by and large, speaking in a very sweeping and general way, women tend to get highly emotional, because in one sense that is their strength. They can give so much love that maybe men can't, you know
Yeah,
and
men don't have the same level of, I think, emotional intelligence. Men are like very less of that, because
yeah.
I think like men, we don't like as men. I don't know whether we're able to express ourselves very well. We are like we don't know how to express ourselves, so we'll use very short words and then we'll try to express, and then we'll get angry and then we get upset. But I hope like with regards to this, I hope like people there are like good interpreters of the Gita who are able to explain this concept well, because like as more and more people would read the Gita and try to understand it, they'll they'll come across this point which would be very difficult to like get past. And hopefully like I mean at least one I think one thing about this time is that we know that women are like equal and sometimes if not better than men on most things. But and so hopefully like there is nuance and people are able to see that it's not about just the men and women. It's like spirit is there in every single being, and so any this thing happens to anybody. Like it can
Sure.
happen to any like um any person, whether it be a man or a woman, is capable of not understanding the true message of the Gita or not understanding the true message of this. Because in today's time, it's going to be because everybody's educated, everybody is like, people are already, they know, like, you can't fool people in this time. Probably you could in the past, but now it's like very difficult. It's impossible to fool people now. So in this time, hopefully people at least they come to the realization that that spirit, it's there in every living entity.
Mm.
And any person, any, like, there can be a woman who understands that, and a man that doesn't understand that, and a man that understands that, and a woman doesn't understand that, and that's completely fine. Like, nobody has to worry too much, because in the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we just, we're
Correct,
just,
correct.
yeah.
Why even take a look at the blind king Dhritarashtra? He was so blinded by his attachment and affection for his evil son Duryodhan that he couldn't take action where it was required, and when it was required, and that's what led to the huge Mahabharata war. So he was not a woman, but he was also blinded and overcome by this
Hmm.
unnecessary attachment. He couldn't show the detachment that's required to discipline Duryodhan. In fact, I think it's in the Bhagavatam, when Duryodhan is born, there are all kinds of portents or evil signs in the skies. The jackals are howling, and the day turns dark, and the sun comes out at night, and all kinds of weird, to show that a very evil individual, or somebody that's all wrong has taken birth. And someone, I'm not sure, there in that situation even suggests that he should be thrown away or put to death straight away. But this is Duryodhan. Duryodhan later goes on to acquire a lot of qualities, and he's some places even described as an excellent warrior, because he has learned from Balaram himself. He learned to fight from Balaram and so on. That's different. But so Dhritarashtra, the blind king, was a man, a father, and not a mother of these Kaurava sons, and particularly of Duryodhan. But he also was not able to show the kind of spiritual intelligence or detachment that was required to put an end to Duryodhan's constant harassment of the Pandavas. He wasn't able to do it. So finally, Lord Krishna steps in. So when they are talking about women being less intelligent, it's important to try and explain this. That the point is about how women are. Emotional intelligence is very high, and spiritual intelligence requires some detachment and some distance from whatever it is you're trying to analyze. If you just completely get swayed and throw yourself into it, you are not going to be able to see the different details or what needs to be done and how to separate the parts, isn't it? That is as far as statements of the scripture goes. Some of those statements basically Srila Prabhupada tries to qualify in different books and explain, at least in his
And
lectures.
also, Prabhupada has this very difficult task of trying to translate literature that was mentioned at a different time, at a different stage in life and time. He's trying to translate that literature into this, and he's trying to also um, put it in a way that the modern audience can understand, like, what the text was.
It's hard.
So
Yeah,
it's very difficult to do that, like, especially when you're dealing with a time when there was no government, there was no democracy, there was no, like, there was no laws, there was nothing going on. So everything was like you could kill somebody and nobody would know that you killed anybody. You just travel, go somewhere else. It was like a wild west sort of situation. So he's but even in that, there was still spirituality. There were people, still sages and gurus, that were doing their work, and they wrote this scripture that time. So he's trying
right,
his best to translate that whole message for an audience that is there now, so that they can understand.
right.
So don't get angry at the messenger. Just make sure that, like, people see it, like,
Exactly,
that
exactly.
they try to understand what it's being tried to said, what's being said there.
Exactly, yeah.
That is.
Absolutely, because so many, we've also had the situation, women who we give the Gita to or we invite for a class come across this statement and they completely get upset and feel demoralized, which is understandable. This is as far as scriptural statements goes. Around the time I joined, there was a big discussion going on in ISKCON, how in one or two places, the English that Srila Prabhupada has used to speak about something maybe which is a sensitive issue, because he was using what was called British colonial English, old fashioned, a
Old
kind of
fashioned.
old fashioned word. And
Mm.
the specific issue I think comes up in the third canto, I must say. So different devotees, different senior disciples of his were saying we should add a note there. There should be, like, you have a footnote, there should be a separate page. The issue was when Srila Prabhupada uses the word rape, what he means is seduce. And somewhere I think it is that there is a statement, basically women like to be raped. I'm not sure if it is still there in the later editions that came out. What he means is women like the chase and pursuit of someone going after them to seduce them. And it is 100% true. I mean, I myself can say it, though I am past that age and past that mentality. Women really love to be pursued by somebody. So what poor Srila Prabhupada meant was that they like to be seduced, to be pursued,
He didn't
because
have the he didn't I guess he didn't have the vocabulary maybe to express
didn't
that
have the
that
vocabulary to express.
expression.
Those days, nobody talked of things like rape because it was not as common and gruesome as it is now, with all horrid weapons and details.
If you say rape now, it will have a very, you'll be like cancel, like you'll be like cancel. People will not like it. Like
That's
they,
right.
they won't.
That's right. But
Yeah.
the disciples who took dictation, they just blindly took it, and I'm not sure whether they were horrified or they didn't have the courage to ask him. And then before the Bhagavatam could be completed, he was gone. So this came up as an issue that we must put a footnote, we must put, I'm not sure what they finally did. But in the discussion, what I understood is that what really he meant was this. He's, as usual, he's spot on when he's talking about the temperament of woman. Today, the modern woman may strike all kinds of poses. That's different. She's equal to the man and she's not affected when man shows interest in her. But this is all humbug. The basic nature of the woman is that it is very flattering for her if some man pursues her, sends her letters and woos her and tries to seduce her and sends her flowers and so on. So that's all that Srila Prabhupada meant, that the woman likes to be pursued. It's now, and someone gave the example that those days, European art, which was making like a big comeback, the Italian Renaissance art, etc. There's a famous painting, The Rape of the Sabine Women. Sabine is some part of Rome. And basically, you type and you will see a whole lot of half nude women, beautiful but very voluptuous, big fat women. They are being carried away by the Romans who have come, and they're just carrying them away. There is dagger and so on in the hands of the male who are coming to, because it is part of looting the wealth of that city that they have conquered. This is common and most unfortunate. Nowadays, it takes again very horrible and cheap and gruesome forms when a city is conquered. I think even Ukraine, there were many examples of women being raped when the different cities in Ukraine fell. But there, what is meant by the rape of the Sabine women is no such actual sexual molestation is taking place. They are just carried away as booty and loot and taken, and then they are conquered through amorous advances and told, now forget about your kingdom and your original husband. You are now here for the rest of your life. I am going to be your husband, or you will be one of my mistresses. So what's happening is a lot of women with, chestnut brown hair flowing, as I said, back view, maybe side view, it's just being carried off. So even there, the rape of the Sabine women, it's considered one of these Greek Roman classic themes. I think it's done in sculpture, but I have seen it is either Titian, or I'm not sure who else, or Rembrandt, or one of those famous painters of that period, 1500, 1600. So there again, rape actually means seduction and being carried away, pursued, carried away as booty and loot, and being considered the wealth that they got out of conquering that particular kingdom and being taken away for another life. So that is another thing where, I mean, God forbid, if someone comes across that statement by Srila Prabhupada, it can easily lead to chaos, total chaos. I'm not sure what they did with it. I should check on the Bhaktivedanta, the Vedanta, the what is it, Veda base, whether they really did
Database.
anything. There were different opinions that we should eliminate the word, we should change the word and put in brackets seduce, meaning seduce, read seduce. Some people objected and said that will mean tampering with the original dictionary. Someone said, Harishauri said, leave a footnote, leave an index at the back. I'm not sure at all what, like a postscript, not sure what they actually did with all the controversial sections of these books, particularly the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. So to get back to this is like a build up to understand why people misunderstand Krishna and the commentators of Krishna. That's how actually the discussion we had until now
Yeah.
is. It is in context. In the context of the verse we're going to study, or we are already studying, verse 11, this makes sense. Everything we discussed about the controversial issues, whether it is women less intelligent or some statements by Prabhupada and so on. Now, if we carry on reading here we are having a situation where they mistake the personality of Godhead to be just an ordinary human being. And why do they do it? Why do they just think, oh, he's just some man he's just a powerful man, he's not really God? If you read the second paragraph of the 11th verse of the 9th chapter, you will see that it is envy to be a supreme controller themselves that causes them to pull down the supreme personality to the level of an ordinary human being. Please read. There are many Ishwaras.
Yeah. There are many Ishwaras, controllers, and one appears greater than another. In the ordinary management of affairs in the material world, we find some official or director, and above him there is a secretary, and above him a minister, and above him a president. Each of them is a controller, but one is controlled by another. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said Krishna is the supreme controller. There are many controllers undoubtedly, both in the material and spiritual world, but Krishna is the supreme controller. Ishvara Paramaha Krishna, and his body is Satchitananda, not material.
Okay, so just making the point that there may be many other types of controllers. There are demigods on the spiritual plane, there are demigods and so on. But Krishna is the supreme controller, Krishna or Vishnu, and he is different because his body is non-material. Sat Chit Ananda. Sat meaning it is eternal. You know, that's why we say Satyameva Jayate. Sat is like in Satya, truth is eternal. Truth always wins. That's
Hmm.
the point. So Satchitananda, that is a mutation that takes place because Sat and Chit come together, the two words. Otherwise, it's Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat is eternal. Chid apparently here in Chid means knowledge, full of knowledge, and he is the most knowledgeable and so on because he knows past, present, and future, and he knows and controls everything. Ananda, he is completely always joyful and blissful. And this brings us down to why does he play like an ordinary human being? Why does he take the role? Why does he crawl in the mud and eat mud? And why does he break pots and throw out whatever is in the pot and so on? Because he likes just for the sheer fun of it. He
Hmm.
takes his very human form, which is considered one of the most confidential uh, uh, um, uh, forms, the one he plays out in Vrindavan, which is he really plays like an ordinary cowherd boy, a baby who's eating dirt, and for the sheer pleasure or the fun of it. Now, if you see children everywhere, they love to empty, just observe, they love to empty dustbins and take out whatever is dirty inside and explore. It's just some natural quality in them. You know,
Hmm.
that, and mothers had to go running after them and say, what are you doing? So, like that, Krishna's showing that very human, baby like, so many years, 5,000 years ago, that quality of just digging mud and eating it. You see, something that's considered dirty or whatever is mud. And so, also, he's breaking pots and getting up to all kinds of mischief to
Hmm.
give great joy to the viewers and his followers so that their hearts soften and melt, and in this way, their attachment to the material world and their material connections will loosen a little. And instead, the attachment to Him keeps increasing so that eventually they can get out of the cycle of birth and death. For that reason alone, He comes and plays out all these pastimes. In the next big paragraph, I read here, material bodies cannot perform the wonderful acts described in previous verses. His body, that is Krishna's body, is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. Although he is not a common man, the foolish deride him and consider him to be an ordinary man. His body is called here Manushim, like a Manushya, Purusha, Manushya, because he's acting just like a man, a friend of Arjuna's, a politician involved in the battle of Kurukshetra. That's true, taking sides and guiding one side. In so many ways, he's acting just like an ordinary man, but actually his body is Satchitananda Vigraha, eternal bliss, knowledge, absolute. This is confirmed in the Vedic language also, Satchitananda Rupaya Krishnaya. That is, I offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Personality and so on. Now, next para, despite the transcendental qualities of Lord Krishna's body, it's full bliss, and there are so many so-called scholars and commentators of Bhagavad Gita who deride, meaning who condemn, and who look down on Krishna as an ordinary man. The scholar may be born an extraordinary man due to his previous good work, meaning that he may be somebody famous, influential, powerful. But this conception of Sri Krishna is due to a poor fund of knowledge. Therefore, he is called a Moodha, foolish man, for only foolish persons consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being. The foolish consider Krishna an ordinary human being because they do not know the confidential activities of the Supreme Lord and his different energies. They do not know that Krishna's body is a symbol of complete knowledge and bliss. Okay. Nor do they know that the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this material world is a manifestation of his is a manifestation of his internal energy, meaning the spiritual energy. He's a master of the material energy, as has been explained in several places. Mama Maya Duratyaya, he claims that the material energy, although very powerful, is under his control. And whoever surrenders unto him can also get out of the control of the material energy. Now, partly out of envy for this position, different people, in fact, not just totally fake godmen, but there was a tradition in one of the royal families in Rajasthan. I've heard it in a lecture, where the Raja of that particular small kingdom claimed to be Kalki, the Kalki avatar. Now, he was an excellent ruler. He had a very peaceful, this is in the 1500s or 1600s. He had a very peaceful kingdom and so on, but he put out this royal decree that Kalki avatar has already come, and that is himself. Because he had a father named whatever is the Kalki avatar's father is meant to be. I forget, but anyway, something with V, and so on, and somewhere in North India. So they just, but this is mostly this kind of misidentification is out of envy, because they want that position which they can't have, because really that Raja also died. He just had an ordinary material body, and so uh, this whole section is talking about his this conception of Krishna is complete foolishness, meaning to think that Krishna is just an ordinary human being. Foolish persons, however, cannot conceive that the personality of Godhead Krishna appearing just like an ordinary man can be the controller. Now, actually, I think this material consciousness is so deeply ingrained in most of us that it comes out in all kinds of forms. Like, I was traveling once, I remember, in a train, and I was sitting with what will be considered pious, respectable, middle class, uh, sort of educated people, and they were talking about a relative of theirs who had been given up for dead in a hospital or had been declared dead. And when the family had kind of finished their crying and weeping and all, and they came to take him, the doctor said, wait, he's showing some signs of life. And wait, and then naturally it grew into a kind of scandal and a controversy. This was like, say, 12 years ago, in a train. Those days I used to travel by train to Mayapur before they upgraded and gave me the flight reimbursement. So the nutshell of what this man said, finally, it's like very telling. He said in Hindi, अच्छा तो देखिए, भगवान के घर में भी mistake होता है, meaning even God makes mistakes. You see, he thought it was time for this particular man to die, and that took place, and then he realized his mistake and brought him back to life. So it is so deeply ingrained, actually, this conception that God is also finally like you and me. No big deal about it. See, this is an example. He also, Bhagwan ke ghar mein bhi, what is the word in Hindi for mistake? गलत गलती होती है गलत हाँ गलती होती है भगवान के घर में भी अच्छा सी so you can equate God with yourself. We make mistakes, it's all okay. God also, just see, God made a big mistake here. So that kind of thinking, it's very deeply rooted in us. Where it's coming from, I don't know. Basically, I think it comes from envy and not wanting to accept that we are so powerless compared to the all-powerful, or lack of knowledge and information, lack of proper guidance and training. If you just read the next para, there are many controversies between the impersonalists and the personalists.
Yeah, there are many controversies between the impersonalists and the personalists about the Lord's appearance as a human being. But if you consult Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the authoritative text for understanding the signs of Krishna, then we can understand that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. He is not an ordinary man, although he appeared on this earth as an ordinary man. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, when the sages headed by Shaunaka inquired about the activities of Krishna, they said, कृतवान् किल कर्माणि सह रामेण केशवः अतिमर्त्यानि भगवान् गुडः कपात manushah. Lord Sri
Yeah.
Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with Balaram, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. The Lord's appearance as a man bewilders the foolish. No human being could perform the wonderful acts that Krishna performed while he was present on this earth. When Krishna appeared before his father and mother Vasudeva and Devaki, he appeared with four hands, but after the prayers of the parents, he transformed himself into an ordinary child. As stated in the Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 3, Text 46, Bahuva Prakritaha Shishuha, he became just like an ordinary child, an ordinary human being. Now, here again, it is indicated that the Lord's appearance as an ordinary human being is one of the features of his transcendental body. In the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, also, it is stated that Arjuna prayed to see Krishna's form of four hands, Taneva Rupena Chaturbhujena. After revealing this form, Krishna, when petitioned by Arjuna, again assumed his original human like form, Manusham Rupam. These different features of the Supreme Lord are certainly not those of an ordinary human being.
So what you're having here is that at will, or depending on the request of his devotee, he can go from four-armed to two-armed. And in the Bhagavad Gita 11th chapter, when we get there, the universal form, Lord, in order to impress Arjuna and readers or viewers of the future through Arjuna's vision, he shows his gives his Vishwarup darshan. But then Arjuna feels very distant from him, and is suddenly kind of horrified
Scared.
and when
He gets
scared.
scared to
Yeah,
perform.
and he says, you just go back to being what you were, and then he shows his two-armed form again. So a lot of the time, this refusal to accept the Supreme Personality as the Supreme Personality and put him down as an ordinary human being, it's really just to exploit the situation. Deep down, the envy and to exploit. Because if somebody can make out or convince the ordinary people that Lord Krishna is just like an ordinary human being, then next stage of that same logic, which is what the Mayavadis do, is to say that then we can become God. The reverse is also possible. With a little special birth and qualification and some special powers, we can become God, and we can lay claim to all kinds of fantastic, horrible things in the name of being God. Now, in one such state, Bhavanagar in Gujarat, I don't know if that custom still prevails or whether it's been done away with now. The Raja of Bhavanagar, it's a very immoral and bad system because they are great Krishna worshippers. But the Raja of Bhavanagar takes on the role of being Lord Krishna himself, in the sense that every a woman within that community, I think that would mean Kshatriya community, who's married, is first given to him to use and enjoy for one night. And most of the time, he ends up impregnating the woman. So the children born of the woman are all the children of the Raja only. Why? In the name, he basically claims to be non-different from that particular deity, that is the Bhavanagar Raja Krishna temple's deity, and that he can enjoy the way Krishna enjoyed with the gopis. So all kinds of horrible, immoral, illegal things. Basically, the idea being just to exploit other human beings, and in this case, women, innocent women and their families, and exploit and take advantage in the name of being one with God. And in order to do that, you have to kind of bring God down to your level and say he is just like an ordinary human being. Some of
Yeah.
those who deride Krishna and who are infected with the Mayawadi philosophy quote the following verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam to prove that Krishna is just an ordinary man. Aham sarveshu bhuteshu bhutatma vastitha sada. The Supreme is present in every living entity. So what? We should take we should better take note of this particular verse from the Vaishnava Acharyas like the Goswamis and so on, instead of following the interpretation of unauthorized persons who deride Krishna. Okay, this verse just goes on to say that we should be so aware. The Vaishnava system is we should be so aware that the Lord is present as a super soul in every individual. It's not enough for us just to bow down to the deity in the temple. We should also be aware in our dealings with other human beings, because he's there. He's even there in the lower creatures, whether it's dogs or cats. He's there as it's just that by their poor karma they get this body, and then they can't get out of that body until they earn enough to go up in the cycle of in the scheme of things. So this whole para is basically telling us here there are three kinds of devotees of the Lord, and the neophyte is in the lower stage. The neophyte devotee gives more attention to the deity in the temple than to other devotees. Okay, no harm. He wants that this sort of mentality should be corrected. That is, a devotee should see that because Krishna is present in everyone's heart as Paramatma, Super Soul, everybody is the embodiment of the temple of the Supreme Lord. So as one offers respect to the temple of the Lord, he should similarly properly respect each and every body in which the Paramatma dwells. Everyone should therefore be given proper respect and should not be neglected. There are many impersonalists who also deride temple worship and say, why do you go there? Just two things here. This impersonalism is normally what is called Mayawadi philosophy, where, yeah, where they say there are two things. There are the Brahmavadis and there are the Mayavadis. Now the Brahmavadis say Krishna doesn't have a form at all.
Formless
The deity
and
formless, just
Brahman.
light. Yeah, Brahman. That's right. He's just light. In one sense, they're a little better than the Mayavadis, because the Mayavadis say, yes, Krishna, the Lord God, has a form, but the form is matter. So that is much, one step worse. It is offensive. It's just matter. So that is the Mayavadis. So there are the Brahmavadis and the Mayavadis. A little earlier, we talked about the Sahajiyas, or the Sahajiya mentality of people basically in Vrindavan, but it can infect anyone. That is, they just take it as Krishna as something cheap and easy to achieve, and interaction and connection and talking to him and him talking back and all is just really easy for them. Sahaj or Saral in Hindi means अरे बहुत easily मिल जाता है. So Sahajya, that is different. Yeah, that is Sahajya, that is different. Asan, exactly. Sahajya is a one mentality, and here philosophically we are going to keep hearing about the impersonalists. That is, there are the under the impersonalists there are the Brahmavadis and the Mayavadis. So for the Mayavadis,
just 1 second. My grandmother is here. She is asking me one thing.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, sorry, my grandma just came. So I think the parents had gone out, so she just wanted me to open the door when they come back.
Okay,
Yeah,
say
please
my
go.
namaste to her and
Yeah,
pranam to her. She can get
yeah,
around. That means she can walk around on her own.
yeah. She can walk around. Yeah,
Okay, very
so
nice. All
she's
right.
yeah. I'll tell you after the recording.
Okay, okay. No, so that's the whole point, that the Brahmavadi and the Mayavadi, we have to take care of this. And here a warning is being given that we should not only be careful that the Lord is not an ordinary human being, and we should also be careful that he doesn't exist only in the temple in the deity form, but he's also there as Paramatma, listening to all our internal dialogue, external bad behavior toward other human beings. He's definitely taking note, and he's going to arrange for us to suffer the reaction until we get it. That if it's part of our, you can say, our what they call purification, till we come to the understanding that we have to treat everyone with some respect, because basically the Lord is sitting inside their heart. There are last bit of this purport. There are also many impersonalists who deride temple worship. They say that since God is everywhere, why should one bother to go to the temple to worship? But then the counter argument is, but if God is everywhere, is he not also in the temple and in the deity? So why not go there? That's the question. And another very important reason for deity worship, and a reason why Srila Prabhupada bent all the conservative rules and allowed neophyte devotees who are become a little steady to keep some small deity in their own, in a clean part of their house, and engage in it, especially for householders, is so that our senses then get a focus. Our eyes, our ability to dress and decorate, to take some trouble and cook,
Yeah,
to make
because
our
it's not, even though like God is everywhere, but like like you can't look at a wall and then and think that okay, God is in the wall, so I can focus on the wall and think of God, and then become okay. The temple helps you to focus, like you said, on God, and then you're able to get that focus
yeah.
and that attentiveness which you won't get the same if you go if you are in your house or room, or you won't get the same feeling. Like if you go to a temple, the, there's an energy that's there. The people who are coming to see the deity and pray, there's like a positive energy that exists in that
Definitely,
place.
definitely, yeah. And it also a form, a physical form, and the more beautiful the alankar or the fresh smell of the flowers and so on. It does things at the level of the heart. It softens the heart. Why, even for the four Kumaras who were supposedly impersonalists, till they were not Mayavadis, but they were impersonalists, till they went up there to Vaikunta, and when they smelt the tulasi, the fragrance of the tulasi leaves on the feet of Vishnu when he came out, apparently that made some great transformation in their mentality and they became personalists. So all this alankar, the deity worship, whether it's in a temple or we have some vigraha in our home, and at least for festivals we're decorating, it all goes to help us in this process of developing a relationship, a loving relationship, and emotions, and softening the heart instead of hardening it, because mostly people are so fried with their experiences in the material world that we become harder and harder. We suppress our emotions more and more.
Mm.
Whereas the deity in the temple and the temple worship helps to undo that. That here is someone, you forget about the material world. Here is someone who you can trust, and gradually keep telling him your worries, or if it is Radharani, tell her worries. It is Radhashtami tomorrow, or the day that Radharani appeared in a little leaf floating down to Vrishabhanu, her father, and Kirtida, her mother. So that's being celebrated tomorrow as Radhashtami.
Oh,
So that's the whole idea behind the deity worship. And I think we can stop here, because the last part of this paragraph, although the personalist, can you read? Although the personalist and the
yeah.
impersonalist, yeah, yeah, yes, please.
Where is it? Oh yeah, okay. Although the personalists and the impersonalists will fight with one another perpetually, a perfect devotee in Krishna consciousness knows that although Krishna is the supreme personality, he is all pervading, as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Although his personal abode is Golok Vrindavan, and he is always staying there, by his different manifestations of energy and by his plenary expansion, he is present everywhere in all parts of the material and spiritual creation.
Okay, so Prabhupada really in the purport is accepting that they will never settle this issue. The personalists and the impersonalists are going to keep fighting with one another perpetually. Now, the impersonalist tends to be more of a jnani. And I've heard it said that the person who is totally disgusted with the material world, he tends to go in the direction of Gyan and hopes for mukti or liberation by approaching the Lord through Gyan. It's a very dry process, and he does not want a personal form of the Lord, because he's just so disgusted with the material world, he's got so fried. Now, the other extreme is the kind of character who is not disgusted at all with the material world, and he thinks there's a terrific amount to enjoy here. So that is the karmi. He is going to do something because he's been told he has certain religious duties and so on, but he's trying. Even those offerings that he makes are like business. They are in exchange for a
There's
request that is granted.
expectation of
That's right.
expectation of getting something in return. Like you praise the demigods and you expect that you'll get something in return
Exactly,
for
exactly.
praising the demigods. That's the
Exactly. Even when he
good
comes to
karma.
Krishna, yeah, even when he comes to Krishna worship, it is with this idea that grant this and grant that. In between, a balanced lot are the
Guys,
bhaktas.
bhakti is
Bhaktas,
good.
yeah, because we have some disgust with the material world. We've understood we are just going to suffer, what to do, but we are stuck here. And we have some things we know we satisfy whatever our kind of our desire for um, to enjoy, and often dovetail it with Krishna so that we can start directing all our efforts towards his enjoyment, and that way make do things that please him, and that way purify our senses and ourselves. So we can stop here because it's 6:15, and you can stop the recording here.
Yeah, yeah.
That is verse 11.